We are not your bank anymore." My father's voice carried across the dining room of the Summit Club, sharp and performative. He slammed his hand onto the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "Honestly, Chloe," my mother sighed, swirling her wine with a look of bored disappointment, "it is time you learned some actual responsibility. We are done funding your mediocrity." They exchanged a glance, a shared smirk of absolute superiority, and let out a low, cruel chuckle. They were enjoying this. My phone buzzed on the tablecloth. I glanced down. It was a text from Arthur, the manager of my private family foundation. The message read, "Application received from Stephen and Deborah Mitchell. They are requesting a $20,000 monthly allowance. Awaiting your approval." I stared at the screen. They were cutting me off publicly while secretly begging my anonymous fund for cash. I didn't blink. I didn't hesitate. I typed a single word: denied. I locked the phone and looked them dead in the eye. "I understand completely," I said. Their laughter stopped instantly. Before I tell you how I legally bought my parents' debt without them knowing, drop a comment telling me where you are listening from. Hit that subscribe button because this is the story of how the black sheep became the landlord. My mother reached into her designer handbag not to retrieve a wallet, but to pull out a crisp, stapled document. She slid it across the white tablecloth with the precision of a litigator serving a subpoena. "We had my firm draft this up," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "It is a repayment contract. Based on your salary, as a junior analyst, we have calculated a payment schedule that shouldn't bankrupt you, provided you stop taking vacations and eating out." I looked down at the paper. It was absurd. They were demanding $24,000 plus 4% interest for what they had called family assistance over the last decade. They had itemized everything: the tutoring when I was 12, the deposit on my first apartment, even the emergency car repair from 3 years ago. My father took a sip of his $300 Cabernet. "We are doing this for your own good, Chloe. You need to learn the value of a dollar. You can't just coast on $86,000 a year and expect us to catch you when you fall." 86,000. That was the salary I told them I made. It was the salary of a junior analyst at a mid-tier firm. It was a lie I had maintained for 5 years. I observed them really analyze them for the first time in a long time. I noted the flashy watches, the brand logos plastered on their clothing, the desperate need to be seen by the waiters and the other patrons. There is a psychological concept I studied when I first started making real money. It is the paradox of stealth wealth. My parents belonged to the school of thought that says wealth must scream to be real. If you have it, you show it. You buy the loudest car, the biggest house, and the most expensive wine because you need the world to validate your existence. But I had learned the opposite truth in the quiet hum of server rooms and trading floors. Real power whispers. Real power is boring. If you look like a threat, people build defenses against you. But if you look like a pebble, they kick you aside and forget you exist. And that is exactly when you can own them. I didn't get angry at the contract. I didn't tear it up or throw wine in their faces. That would have given them the emotional reaction they were craving. They wanted a tantrum. They wanted to see me break so they could feel strong. Instead, I signaled the waiter. He approached nervously, sensing the tension. My father reached for the leather bill folder, ready to perform his usual ritual of groaning about the price before paying it to establish dominance. I intercepted the folder before his hand could touch it. "I have this," I said quietly. "Don't be ridiculous, Chloe," my father snapped. "You can't afford a dinner at the summit. Put it down." I ignored him. I pulled a black metal card from my sleeve, not the debit card associated with my junior analyst checking account, but a titanium card linked to my private holding company. I slipped it into the folder and handed it back to the waiter. "Add 20%, I told him. My parents sat in stunned silence. The script had broken. The broke, struggling daughter doesn't pay for the $500 dinner. "What are you doing?" my mother hissed, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching this disruption of the hierarchy. "I'm leaving," I said. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles on my blazer. "And I'm taking this." I picked up the repayment contract and slid it into my bag. "Sit down," my father commanded, his voice rising. "We are not finished." "Yes," I said, my voice flat and monotone. "We are." I walked out of the dining room without looking back. I could feel their eyes boring into my back, confused and furious. This technique is called gray rocking. It is a method of dealing with narcissists and toxic manipulators. You become a gray rock. You become uninteresting. You show no emotion, you give no fuel, and you make yourself utterly boring until they lose interest or lose their minds trying to provoke you. For years I had played the role of the gray rock perfectly. I was the boring daughter, the disappointing daughter, the one with the small life. I stepped out into the cool night air and walked past the line of valets bringing up Porsches and Mercedes. I walked to the far end of the lot and unlocked my 5-year-old Honda Civic. It had a dent in the rear bumper and cloth seats. To my parents, this car was a symbol of my failure. To me, it was the perfect camouflage. It was an invisibility cloak. I got in, turned the key, and drove toward the highway. As the city skyline came into view, shimmering with lights, I felt my shoulders drop. The mask could finally come off. They thought I was driving home to a studio apartment to cry over my debt. They had no idea I was driving to the headquarters of the entity that now owned their financial future. The gray rock was about to crack open, and they weren't ready for the diamond inside. I pulled the Honda into the narrow alley behind the brownstone on Commonwealth Avenue. My parents believe I rent Unit 4B, a cramped studio with drafty windows and rattling pipes. They love that apartment. It fits their narrative. Every time they visit, they scan the peeling paint and the mismatched furniture with a look of grim satisfaction, their eyes practically screaming, "See, she needs us." They don't know that I don't pay rent. I bought the building 4 years ago through a blind trust. I keep the lobby intentionally scuffed and the hallway lights dim strictly for their benefit. It is theater. I walked up the stairs, unlocked the heavy steel door, and stepped inside. The air here was different, filtered, cool, and silent. I tossed the repayment contract onto my glass desk and opened my laptop. Authentication took 3 steps. Biometrics, a physical key, and a rolling code. The screen flickered to life, bathing the dark room in a soft blue glow. My real dashboard loaded. Total assets under management: $360,452,118. My parents think I am a junior analyst because I let them think it. When I tried to explain my research into high-frequency algorithmic trading during college, my father told me to stop playing video games and focus on finding a husband. So I stopped explaining. I built the Silencer, an AI model that predicts microvolatility in the bond market. While they were lecturing me about the price of lattes, my code was executing thousands of trades a second, harvesting millions from the inefficiencies of the market. I minimized the main portfolio and opened a separate spreadsheet. I had named it the Parents' Return Fund. This was the money they were screaming about at dinner. The spreadsheet was a simple 2-column ledger. On the left were the dates and amounts of every loan they had given me. $500 for books, $2,000 for a security deposit, $3,000 for the emergency car repair. Total principal $24,000. On the right was the current value. Total balance $360,000. For 10 years, every time they handed me a check, they accompanied it with a lecture. "Make it stretch, Chloe. We are sacrificing for you, Chloe. Don't waste this, Chloe." I never spent a dime of it, not 1 cent. I lived on ramen and tap water in the early years so I wouldn't have to touch their money. Instead, I deposited every single check into this dedicated trading account and let my algorithms run wild with it. Why? Because of the concept of the emotional ledger. In finance, every debt carries interest. In toxic families, the interest isn't paid in percentage points. It is paid in guilt, shame, and control. I knew that if I spent their money on actual rent or food, I would be indebted to them forever. I would have confirmed their belief that I was incapable of survival. So, I treated their money as a liability, not an asset. I invested it. I grew it. I kept the cash, but I paid the emotional interest in silence. I endured the lectures and the eye rolls and the public shaming because I knew the math was working in my favor. This account wasn't just money. It was the price of their doubt. Every dollar in that $360,000 balance represented a time they made me feel small. And now the account was fully matured. I was ready to close the position. I was about to transfer the funds to a holding account when a notification chimed, cutting through the silence of the room. New email, priority high. Sender, Deborah Mitchell, Senior Partner Mitchell & Associates. Subject, notice of default and intent to litigate. I clicked it open. My mother hadn't waited until morning. She had gone straight from the restaurant to her office. The email was a formal demand letter threatening to sue me for the $24,000 plus damages if I didn't sign the repayment contract within 48 hours. I stared at the screen. They were threatening legal action against the only person on earth who could actually save them. I didn't feel fear. I felt the cold, hard click of a strategy locking into place. I picked up my phone and dialed Arthur. "It's Chloe," I said when he answered. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. We are going to liquidate an asset. The next morning, the assault began. My phone started vibrating at 6 in the morning and didn't stop. It wasn't my parents. They were too cowardly to do the dirty work themselves now that legal threats were on the table. It was Ashley. My sister, the art gallery director with the perfect smile and the life subsidized entirely by our parents' debt, was now the designated attack dog. I let the first 3 calls go to voicemail. On the 4th, I picked up. "What is wrong with you?" Ashley's voice was shrill, lacking her usual polished gallery tone. "Mom is a wreck. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Do you have any idea how selfish you are being?" I put the phone on speaker and set it on the passenger seat of my Honda as I merged onto the expressway. "Good morning to you too, Ashley. Don't give me that calm attitude, Chloe. You embarrassed them at the summit. You walked out on a bill." "I paid the bill," I corrected, my voice steady, "and I tipped 20%. "That is not the point. You threw their help back in their faces. They are threatening to sue you, Chloe. Mom is serious. She is drafting the filing today." "Do you really want to be sued by your own mother over $24,000? Just apologize and sign the plan. It is not that much money." "It is not about the money," I said, "and you know that. It is always about the money with you. You act like you are so above it all in your cheap apartment with your cheap car, but you are the one causing all this drama. Just fix it." I disconnected the call. It felt like closing a losing position. I didn't have the energy to explain to Ashley that she was arguing over crumbs while the bakery was burning down. I arrived at the financial district 30 minutes later. I parked the Honda in a public garage 3 blocks away, old habits die hard, and walked to the glass skyscraper that housed my family office. The security guards nodded as I passed. I took the private elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors opened into a sleek, minimalist lobby that smelled of espresso and money. Arthur was waiting for me in the conference room. He had the notice of default printed out on the table. "Your mother has aggressive letterhead," Arthur said, sliding a coffee toward me. He was 60, impeccably dressed, and the only father figure I had ever respected. He knew everything. "She likes to intimidate," I said, taking a sip. "She thinks I am a frightened 29-year-old junior analyst who can't afford a lawyer." Arthur chuckled. "Does she know you could buy her firm before lunch?" "She thinks I can barely buy lunch." I looked at the thread again. "They are escalating, Arthur. They aren't just angry, they are desperate. People don't sue their children over $24,000 unless they have a liquidity crisis." "We denied the allowance request last night," Arthur reminded me. "That must have been the trigger." "Exactly. They were banking on that $20,000 a month. Without it, they are underwater." I walked to the window, looking out over the city. Below me, thousands of people were rushing to jobs they hated to pay debts they couldn't afford. My parents were no different, except they believed they were gods. "I am done, Arthur," I said, turning back to him. "I am done playing the dutiful daughter. I am done being the safety net they don't know exists." I sat down at the table and tapped the glass surface. There is a concept in economics called the sunk cost fallacy. It is the irrational behavior of continuing to invest in a losing endeavor just because you have already invested time or money into it. You throw good money after bad because you can't admit you made a mistake. Arthur nodded. "And you think you are the bad investment?" "No," I said coldly. "I think they are. I have spent my entire adult life trying to be good enough for them, trying to save them from themselves without bruising their egos. That was my investment, and the return has been 0. Actually, it has been negative. They didn't invest in me, Arthur. They hedged against me. They bet on my failure so they could feel superior. And now that the market has turned, they want to change their position." I pushed the legal threat back across the table. "I am liquidating the asset." Arthur straightened up his demeanor, shifting from mentor to employee. "What are your instructions?" "Enforce the rules of the foundation strictly," I commanded. "If they apply again, deny it. If they call, send them to legal. And Arthur, pull the file on Project Summit." Arthur paused, the shell company holding the mortgage on their estate. "Yes," I said. "It is time to audit the books." Arthur nodded and left the room. I sat alone in the silence of the 42nd floor. My mother wanted a legal battle. Fine. She was playing checkers in a courtroom. I was about to play chess with her life. Arthur returned to the conference room 10 minutes later. He wasn't holding a coffee anymore. He was holding a red folder, and the relaxed mentorship demeanor was gone. He looked like the shark he used to be before he retired to manage my money. "We have a problem," he said, placing the folder on the glass table. "And it isn't the lawsuit against you." "What is it?" I asked, sensing the shift in the air. "It is criminal," he said simply. "I pulled the monitoring logs for Project Summit. That is the shell company we used to buy your parents' distressed mortgage note 2 years ago. We have been sitting on that debt quietly, preventing the original bank from foreclosing on them. We never asked for a payment. We just held the position. I know, I said. I authorized it. Well, Arthur continued opening the file. It seems your parents got desperate after you denied the allowance last night. They went to a local lender this morning to try to refinance the estate. They wanted to pull out $300,000 of equity in cash. They can't refinance, I said, confused. Project Summit holds the first lien. No bank will lend to them until that debt is cleared. Exactly, Arthur said. The new lender ran a title search. They saw the encumbrance from our shell company. They told your parents they couldn't approve the new loan unless Project Summit released the lien. Arthur slid a document across the table. It was a scanned copy retrieved from the county clerk's digital filing system just minutes ago. This was filed at 9 in the morning today, Arthur said. I looked at the paper. It was a certificate of satisfaction and lien release. It stated that the debt to Project Summit Holdings had been paid in full and that the lien on the Mitchell estate was hereby dissolved. At the bottom of the page was a signature. It was signed A, Sterling Arthur's legal proxy name for the shell company. But it wasn't Arthur's signature. The loops were too wide. The pressure points were wrong. It was a shaky, arrogant attempt at forgery. I recognized the penmanship immediately. It was my father's. They forged a lien release, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. They faked a document to tell the new bank that they didn't owe us money anymore, Arthur clarified. They erased a $1.2 million debt with a fake signature so they could trick a new bank into giving them cash. Chloe, this isn't just bad behavior. This is bank fraud. This is a federal felony. I stared at the forged signature. My father was so entitled, so convinced of his own immunity, that he believed he could simply rewrite legal reality because he needed money. He thought Project Summit was just some faceless corporate entity that wouldn't notice. He didn't know he was forging his own daughter's signature. If we report this, Arthur said quietly, they go to prison. Mandatory minimums. I looked out the window. The city looked sharper, colder. My parents weren't just toxic narcissists anymore. They were criminals. And by holding this document, I was the only thing standing between them and an indictment. The safety net was gone. They had cut it themselves. I closed the folder. My hand wasn't shaking. Do not report it, I said. Not yet. What do you want to do? Arthur asked. I stood up. Set up a meeting. Call my mother's office. Tell them I am ready to negotiate the repayment contract. Tell them I want to meet tonight. Where? The Summit Club, I said. The same table? I picked up the red folder. And Arthur, bring the deed. The Summit Club was louder tonight. A jazz quartet played in the corner, but the sound felt miles away. My parents were already seated at table 14. They looked victorious. My mother had her closer face on the smug, relaxed expression she wore after dismantling a junior associate. My father was pouring wine, his hands steady, his forgery apparently forgotten in the rush of impending cash. They thought they had won. They thought I was here to surrender. I walked to the table. I didn't sit immediately. Well, my father said, not looking up from his glass. Look who decided to be reasonable. Sit down, Chloe, my mother commanded, patting the chair next to her. We have the updated contract ready for signature. We added a clause for legal fees given the trouble you have caused today. She slid the stapled document toward my placemat. I sat down. I didn't touch their paper. Instead, I placed my leather portfolio on the table. I am not signing that, I said. My father sighed, a theatrical exhale of patience being tested. Chloe, we are done playing games. You sign or we file the suit tomorrow. And trust me, you do not want your mother as an enemy in court. I don't think you want to go to court either, I said. Is that a threat? My mother laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. With what money? Your junior analyst's salary? No, I said. With this. I reached into my portfolio and slid the first document across the table. It was the Parents' Return Fund statement. What is this? My father asked, squinting at the numbers. That is a statement for an account named the Parents' Return Fund, I said. Every dollar you loaned me for 10 years is in there. I invested it all. The balance is $360,000. My mother froze. You have $300,000. Yes, I said, and I was going to give it back to you, until yesterday. Before they could process that, I added the second item, the red folder. And this, I said, is the deed to your house. My father's face went gray. Excuse me. I own the mortgage, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the jazz music. 2 years ago, when you were facing foreclosure because Dad's practice was failing, a company called Project Summit bought your debt. You thought you were saved by a clerical miracle. You weren't. You were saved by me. You, my mother whispered. You are Project Summit. I am the silent shareholder, I said. I am the anonymous donor you applied to last night for the $20,000 allowance. And I am the landlord of the house you are currently sleeping in. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. The arrogance drained out of their faces like water from a cracked glass. They looked small. They looked old. But, my father stammered, his voice trembling. But the lien. We. The refinance. I know, I said. I laid the final document on top. The copy of the forged lien release. I know you forged the signature this morning, I said. I know you committed federal bank fraud to try to steal equity from a house you don't legally own. My father made a sound like a choking gasp. My mother, the high-powered attorney, looked at the document and closed her eyes. She knew exactly what that piece of paper meant. It meant prison. It meant disbarment. It meant the end of everything. Chloe, my mother whispered, reaching a shaking hand toward me. Chloe, please. We were desperate. We didn't know. You didn't know it was me, I corrected, but you knew it was a crime. I leaned forward. The power in the room shifted so violently I could almost feel the air pressure drop. I wasn't the disappointment anymore. I wasn't the child. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. You threatened to sue me for $24,000, I said, my voice calm, factual, lethal, while I was holding a $1.2 million mortgage and evidence of a felony. I stood up. I looked down at them, the people who had made me feel small for my entire life. They were terrified. I own the chair you are sitting in, I said. I own the roof you sleep under, and right now I own your freedom. I picked up the forged document. We are done negotiating. My mother was weeping softly, her face buried in her hands. My father stared at the tablecloth, his face the color of ash. They were no longer the titans of industry or the pillars of the community. They were defendants waiting for sentencing. I didn't offer a tissue. I offered a settlement. Here are the terms, I said, my voice cutting through my mother's sobs. I am establishing a revocable living trust, effective immediately. The $360,000 from the Parents' Return Fund will be deposited into this trust. It will be converted into a fixed annuity. My father looked up, his eyes glassy. An annuity. You will receive a monthly stipend, I continued. It will cover your groceries, your utilities, and a modest lifestyle. You will not have access to the principal. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot cash it out. I tapped the deed on the table. As for the house, I am keeping the title. You may continue to live there, rent-free as tenants at will. But Project Summit retains ownership. If you attempt to refinance again, or if you attempt to take out a line of credit, I will evict you. And the document, my father whispered, glancing at the forgery. I will keep the original in a safe deposit box, I said. Consider it my insurance policy. As long as you abide by the terms of the trust, it stays in the dark. If you harass me, sue me, or try to leverage me again, I turn it over to the district attorney. What about Ashley? My mother asked weakly. Ashley is 34 years old, I said. She is cut off. Effective tonight, she can find a job or she can learn to live within her means. She is no longer my liability. I stood up. I didn't wait for them to agree. They had no leverage to disagree. I will have Arthur send over the paperwork tomorrow, I said. Do not contact me personally. All communication goes through the family office. I turned and walked away. I left them sitting at the best table in the restaurant, surrounded by the wreckage of their own ego. The valet stand was waiting, but I didn't go to the Honda. I had texted Arthur earlier to have it towed. Instead, a black sedan was idling at the curb. The driver opened the door, and I slid into the leather interior. Home, Miss Mitchell? He asked. Yes, I said. The penthouse? We drove through the city, winding up toward the skyline. We passed the brownstone with the peeling paint and the drafty windows. We kept going higher until we reached the glass tower overlooking the harbor. I took the private elevator to the top floor. The doors opened into my real home, 3,000 square feet of silence, glass, and steel. I walked to the kitchen island and opened my laptop one last time. I pulled up the Parents' Return Fund spreadsheet. $360,000. The price of my freedom. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I highlighted the rows, right-clicked, and selected Delete. The numbers vanished. The screen went blank. I closed the laptop and walked out onto the balcony. The wind was cold, whipping my hair across my face, but I didn't shiver. Below me, the city lights burned like millions of little stars. Somewhere down there, my parents were learning how to live small. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the thin, clean air. I wasn't the gray rock anymore. I wasn't the hidden asset. I was just Chloe. And for the first time in my life, the ledger was balanced. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for peace. If you have ever had to be the bad guy just to save yourself like this video, share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't a negotiation. And subscribe for more stories from the silent side of success.